Yo, what's going on everybody? It's your boy Naruto Explain here, bringing you guys another Boruto 2 Blue Vortex discussion. Today I want to talk to you guys about the big elephant in the room. Now that we have the information we do from Boruto 2 Blue Vortex chapter 13, that should make us as a community take a much closer look at the dynamic of Ada, at the dynamic of Amado and Delta a lot closer. Chapter 13 of Boruto 2 Blue Vortex, it is coming out on the 20th this month, so 2 days as of when you're seeing this video, and my chapter review editor, he is currently working on the review right now, so we should be good to go for a release on the 20th. And as always, read the official release on the Viz Media Shonen Jump app or Shueisha's Manga Plus app, even if you've read the leaks, because it supports Mikio Ikimoto and it takes 2 minutes to read the chapter, which real quick, I got a handful of DMs from people that are worried about the translation being used for the edit. So I'm going to clarify here to remove any worries that some of you guys might have. While I do use leaked translations for the reviews, at least visually, partially because the officials are not always correct, like the Mitsuki and the Ada conversation a few chapters ago. When I script the review, I have someone who I know and I trust that is fluent in Japanese look over the raw scans and tell me how they would phrase things, where what they're saying differs from the fan translations that are out there, because Japanese is extremely context heavy and it is not a word for word translation into English. So no need to worry there. The general tone is going to be the same. It's just going to be phrased slightly different than the official, the fan translation. Here's the thing though. In the chapter, we get the reveal that Amado was holding back information about his knowledge of Shibai cells and his usage of the cells. Amado withheld the information that the technology he used to make the humans and clones who consisted of the car inners into cyborgs, they all made use of Shibai's DNA as a binding agent to the ninja tech that he used, which operates on a cellular level. That in of itself is a huge omission of information, and it is leading us down the path of a revival of a future Otsutsuki, particularly when he himself was directly told by Naruto to stop holding back on all the information he shares, because Naruto understood what Kashin Koji was teaching Boruto in the chapter. For shinobi to be most effective, they must be made aware of the various bits of information in order to make the best possible decision to ensure their survival. The entire time Naruto had been dealing with Amado, the information, it was always being told halfway true, forcing Naruto's Hokage to make decisions in a reactionary way, which anybody who's been in a leadership position knows that is the worst spot to be in. Even for someone like Naruto, who went from having the song being sung in his head, 3 little monkeys jumping on the bed, to being a more than capable but naive Hokage who is able to make logical and mostly sound decisions, but oftentimes his heart gets in the way of some of the more logical decisions that are required of him. Even for someone like Naruto, he still needs all the information or most of the information in order to properly come to the same conclusion. Yet despite all of this, Amado withholds the fact that he had other cyborgs, including Delta, who were in possession of Shibai cells and could awaken his powers at any given moment. That brings us to the greater problem with Amado and Delta and the eventual revival of an Otsutsuki. Given how Amado used the information about his daughter dying as a way to move the conversation away from the pointed topic of Shibai, I think it's time for us to have a couple of serious conversations about whether or not this whole scene is a giant Chekhov's gun or a pair of Chekhov's guns waiting to go off at a later point in the future. And I think there's a strong case for it, which is why Amado, someone who played a huge role in the last 40 chapters, literally the last half of Boruto's manga, in terms of how he was moving the story forward, either directly or indirectly, has been kept out of our minds as readers. Yet everything that we see that has all occurred, it always leads back to Amado, and in particular Kawaki's worry that if he places a karma seal onto the clone of Amado's daughter, the risk of it creating a brand new Otsutsuki. I think this chapter, it opens us up to that very real possibility, because it shows us that in spite of everything in terms of how brilliant Amado is, which Amado is absolutely brilliant, there are still a lot of chunks about the Otsutsuki clan that he does not know the truth about, and there are still huge chunks about the lore that he has miscalculated with. As Katasuke put it, the things that Amado is dabbling in, they are well beyond human comprehension. And Amado also has the fact that Orochimaru, another genius, said the same thing about the God Tree, whereas the other two scientists, they were humble enough to see alien science and materials and go, yeah, this is well beyond anything I can understand, and so they chose to proceed with caution, with curiosity, but caution nevertheless. That does not apply to Amado just because of his desperation when it comes to his daughter. Amado, he took the approach of Pandora's box is right there. Someone's got to open it, so why don't I be the one to open it? On one hand, that is a very fair and logical assumption to make. Eventually the box is going to get open, so why not just rip the band-aid off? And yet on the other hand, it's a trope that exists in literature for a reason, to serve as a warning to readers that some things should not be open and some things should just be left alone. In literature, the scientist is almost always used for this lesson to be taught to readers, or to rephrase it, since I don't like dealing with absolutes. In most cases, the scientist is somebody that is closely associated with this trope. Even Amado, at his own words, assuming we give him the benefit of the doubt, which I don't, that for once in his life, he was being fully transparent. He said himself that this was his last option to revive his daughter, and that he couldn't fully guarantee that Kawaki's fear of her transforming into an Otsutsuki wouldn't occur. And this, in my opinion, became even more of a likelihood now that we've hit the breaking point that the story has showed us, where there are so many miscalculations of Amado that have continued to pop up. I strongly believe the story is distracting us from the occurrence with this reveal of Kashin Koji and the multiple alternate timelines for this very reason. I go much more in depth in a Kashin Koji video explaining the inspiration behind his power, the 10 directions, where the Buddhism lies in this power and how that's explained in it, how it relates to Ishiki's Kokugan Eye, because there is a connection there, and how the concept of alternate timelines work, which you should be seeing that on Wednesday or Thursday most likely, if I have the review up on Tuesday like planned. But the concept of alternate timelines slash potential future outcomes, where the future is always changing, that has changed everything we need to have a discussion about moving forward. But in all the futures that Kashin Koji saw, do you know what was never brought up even once? Amado's daughter being revived. Something that was a huge plot point at the end of Boruto Naruto Next Generations, because her revival is why Amado set this whole plan to betray Ishiki into motion. Every time Kashin Koji saw the future, it always resulted in Ishiki winning, either directly through his resurrection or through Code carrying out his will and harvesting a chakra fruit. As Kashin Koji said it, it doesn't just stop with Ishiki's death. Ishiki continues to leave a long stretching shadow over the ninja world that has not gone away yet, even though Ishiki's been dead for almost 40 chapters, or well, over 40 chapters, I think. That, my friends, is being used to cover up the detail with Amado's daughter. She never gets revived in any of those timelines that Kashin Koji saw. The timeline always ends right before she ever gets revived, because here's the thing, we currently see Boruto and Kashin Koji, they are attempting to change the timeline, to change fate, because as Koji puts it, the future is always ever changing. Even when you get to set points, eventually something happens where various decisions they get made which send the story down one or two paths. One being what was supposed to happen and the other being an alternate path. With Boruto and Kashin Koji currently trying to change the future, it means we're going to get to a point where we find out whether or not Kawaki's fear is right. And given the heavy influence that Boruto takes from Dragon Ball, we have to go back again to future Trunks returning from the future, to future Trunks returning from the future, and the warnings that he had about Dr. Gero and his cyborgs 17 and 18 in order to understand why I'm sounding the alarm bells. Now, I'm going to keep it brief so as to not fully annoy the people who, I don't like Dragon Ball, but I stand on the belief, as you guys know, that in order to properly appreciate something, you have to have a firm grasp, or at least a partial understanding of the things that influence it. When Trunks came from the future, we saw him warn Goku of two cyborg teenagers who would basically destroy the world in 3 years. 3 years pass, and instead of two cyborg siblings, Goku is met with an odd couple of one android in the form of Android 19 and one cyborg in the form of number 20, who was in reality Dr. Gero. After their defeat, we're then met with the two cyborgs who Trunks warns of, 17 and 18, but we're also met with android number 16, who is modeled after Dr. Gero's dead son, who Goku killed when he was a child. This leads us to Cell, the biomechanical cyborg, who is the final villain of the arc, the greatest creation of Dr. Gero, and the biggest threat that the planet had ever seen up to this point. Trunks was someone from the future who had all the information about what was coming, but the future changed in the timeline, and the unseen variables they came as a result. And so everyone was woefully unprepared. I'm sounding the alarm bell right now, in that this is one of those same similar situations where those very moments, an unseen variable in the timeline is already here, and we're not seeing people talk about it enough. We're already seeing the signs that this is the case. I want you to think about it for a second. Notice how Kashin Koji and Boruto were both shocked that Himawari possessed Kurama. The only reason for them to be shocked is because in none of the future timelines that Kashin Koji saw was Himawari ever in possession of Kurama. That is a change in the timeline. The future is changing from when Kashin Koji saw it last. Most of it is staying the same, but there are small changes being made. This is not, and it will not be, the last change we see. Just sticking to the aforementioned premise of Kashin Koji being our future Trunks in this scenario. The way that Kashin Koji phrased everything, Jura was supposed to be the biggest threat that they had to worry about right now because they're on this path. He told Boruto, if we go down this path to save Sasuke, this is the most dangerous and the most dire and bleakest path if you do this. I've seen the future and it leads to Jura, the leader of the wicked Shinju, coming out, and that in turn will lead to your death at the hands of Jura. If and when this changes, you have to go back to the classic trope of you eliminate one threat only for another unseen and more dangerous threat to take its place. It's kind of like cutting off the head of a Hydra. You cut off the head and then two more heads come in its place. What was the common theme in most of the timelines that Kashin Koji saw? The common theme was that an Otsutsuki was the one who harvested a chakra fruit, or a follower of an Otsutsuki harvested a chakra fruit. What was Kawaki's fear about placing karma on a clone of Amado's daughter? That an Otsutsuki would be reborn of it. And the story very conveniently has not showed you any signs of there being the karma seal placed on the clone of Amado's daughter. While Kawaki's karma is supposed to be weaponized, keyword supposed to be, we also have to keep in mind what Boruto's premise was in regards to code, which is that the karma seal, it still came from an Otsutsuki. It is Otsutsuki technology basically, and it caused an unforeseen change in the Tentels that was not accounted for. Kawaki's body genetically, it has Ishiki's genetics in it. While his karma seal right now does contain Akabe's genetic data, it is still going to be placed on her clone via someone Amado says, and I'm damn near quoting verbatim, is still Ishiki's vessel, and that will never change. Code's karma seal, it also came from Ishiki, and even though it was a defective karma, it still managed to alter the Tentels. There's going to more than likely than not be a mutation here when this karma seal does get placed onto the clone of Amado's daughter. We have Otsutsuki trickery afoot here. The alarm bells are going off in my head right now, because the one thing I learned during my time when I was an editorial assistant and I got mentored by an author who won awards for her writing, when you introduce things into a story, like a gun on a table, it has to be fired off at least once, or picked up, or even mentioned at some point by the end of the story, or it serves no purpose. Writers, they will use things such as this either for the purpose of planting a red herring to eventually subvert expectations of readers, or for a Chekhov's gun rule in terms of it's there and it has to get fired off at some point. Reminder, the chapter review, it is going to be worked on and it should be out on the 20th. The chapter review editor is cooking this up as you guys are watching this, so make sure to tune in because the review is 25 minutes long. In the meantime, click here to watch this video from my Anime Explained channel, or click here to watch the Naruto Explained video that YouTube has said that you will probably enjoy.